ISO FileMaker Magazine, the professional's resource for FileMaker know-how.
Hey there, and welcome back to yet another FileMaker tutorial video. We are going to be learning more about FileMaker Pro. My name is Matt Petrowski, bringing you these tutorials from my website, FileMakerMagazine.com. In this video tutorial, we are going to be taking a look at a progress bar. This is something I did all the way back in 2017. I mean, I've been doing them for a long time, but this is an enhancement. So let's take a look at the file and see what we're talking about. Alright, we've got the file, we're here on my desktop, and we are going to take a look. Quite simply, it is a progress bar. As I click this button of Assign Dates, what we have here is a number of records. There's actually over 8,000 records in this database. I click Assign, and we get a progress dialog box that comes up, and it's using the card window. Now, the first time when I shot this video was back in 2017, and that was when card windows had just been released, and we were discovering all kinds of ways to use them. When I originally released this video, it was based on a single script, and what I have as an enhancement in this updated 2.0 version is a scripting system that makes this completely modular, meaning it is so easy to plug and play. As long as you create the layout and then copy one script, you'll be good to go. So let's take a look at how this works. I'll break it down, the fundamentals. Of course, if you're a subscriber to the magazine website, then you'll have access to the file that we have here on screen, and you will be able to simply just copy and paste directly from this. So let's take a look at how this breaks down and fundamentally how it's implemented. Alright, so the first thing that you need to understand is that for every set of records that you're going to modify or process, you're going to need a dedicated layout. So we can see right here that this dedicated layout called progress in this technique file is currently the only layout that I have that is dedicated to being used as a card window. Now, as I open this up, what we're going to see, I'm going to open it for you, is we are going to see a layout that quite simply has just been made so that it's dynamic. You can see that as I drag the layout out, everything is floating within the layout so that whether the card window is this big or whether the window is this wide or whether it's this tall, everything sort of adjusts. Now, in the previous iteration of this, what I did is everything was pretty much static. And by static, I mean that the message or the progress that you display, the words, whatever you want to say, was all a static bit of text. You can see one of the changes that I've made now is I'm using a global variable. And what makes this really nice is that by making this modular, we are able to pass into the script what we want this dialog to say. So what this means is this becomes multi-purpose now. This one layout, which has context based on the records that you're processing, can pretty much be used in multiple ways because you're able to change what the message is that you're going to say. I have not put in static text such as the word processing. So instead of using the processing, I could change that to scanning or adjusting or whatever you want to do. And we'll see that this is part of the script that I'm going to show you in terms of how this works. Under the bottom here, we have what I've been using for a long time, and it is one of the holdovers. In FileMaker, we always had this ability to have a repeating calculation. So as I go to the defined database, and we can see that I've named the field a all caps field, which means for me, it's a global field. But in this case, it's not actually a global field. To me, a global field and an unstored calculation are relatively the same thing. The only difference there is you're just using the calculation engine versus it being empty and you being able to put whatever you want. So we need the calculation field in order to show all of the increments of the progress bar itself. So we'll take a look at that really quickly. It is really pretty simple and straightforward in terms of how this works. We'll zoom in, see if we can get that all on screen here. There we go. And I'll move that so we can see the whole thing. So this is really simple. When we are doing a record loop, all we are doing is taking into account the percentage or the amount of records as we get to each record relative to the found count. Now, we're not going to do it based on the total record count. It's going to be based on the found count. So what is that? That is simply looking at whatever current number you're on and then simply looking at the difference between a percentage of number of bars. So in this case, we're just taking 100, and 100 that's the easiest thing for us to do. We always go from 0 to 100%. Unless you're getting more than 100% of something. So that means on our layout, if we're going to be using 100% as our value, then we need to have 100 little repetitions. So when we zoom out here and we look down at the bottom, we can see that the number of repetitions on this particular unstored calculated field is exactly 100. So if I was to change this number to say, if I wanted to support for some reason 150, which there really is no reason in this particular example to actually do that, then I would just want to make sure and adjust this value right here correspondingly. So we are simply going to say if the current record number that we are on is greater than the integer of the total found count divided by 100, we're going to multiply that times the get calculation repetition number. Now this is the function that makes it work. So in other words, in each of the repetitions of this unstored calculated field, we either want to have a 0 or a 1. So we're either going to have a true or we're going to have a false. When you look at the actual field right here, we can see if I do a select all, well, it's not going to show it right now. There's multiple ways that we can format this particular field, but this is the field. If we take a look at the area over here, the inspector, which we will go to the data tab, the last one right there. So as I scroll up, actually, no, I have to scroll up. I can't just close the field. So here it is right here, show repetition. So you can see that we are using this repeating unstored calculated field with that calculation. If we were to reduce this to 50, then of course it's going to go half as much. We'll put the 100 back there. And the only thing that we need to do once that calculation evaluates is put on conditional formatting. We can see it really faintly right here as it's getting cut off or truncated because we have shoved this to make it really small. But here's how simple it is. We look at the conditional formatting on this particular field, and in its simplicity, it's right there. Self is true. Now the calculation itself is evaluating to be either a 1 or a 0. If it's 1, it's true. And we're saying if the content of you yourself is true, then you are just going to use a fill color. So if you want to change the color of the bar, you're going to do that right here. It's super simple. You just change to whatever color matches the theme that you are using in your FileMaker solution. So the bar itself is pretty straightforward. And we can see when we are in this layout mode, looking at this, if we were to use the slider, we can see that as we use the slider, the bar is just going to render because that unstored calculation is either going to put a 1 or a 0 in each one of these, and then the conditional formatting is simply going to be either the color or not. So I love that about this because what it does is it makes this so easy to copy and paste. All I have to do is come in here, and for any other layout where I want to process records, I'm simply going to make a copy of that layout. So right here, I would simply select on this layout called Progress. I would click on the button Duplicate to duplicate the layout. Then I will double click on the layout, which will bring up the layout setup, and I will simply just change the context. As soon as I change the context, I now have a progress bar for a completely different context, a different set of records that I can process there. So I will have multiple layouts, each layout for all of the different places where I want to process records, but the processing now is all managed by one single script. I do not have to create an individual script for all of the different times that I want to process records. So that's all we have left to discuss, and we're going to take a look at that right now. Okay. So, scripting. This is really pretty straightforward and simple in terms of what I've done. We can see right here that I have 3 scripts. I have process records, I have progress bar, which expects JSON as a parameter, and then run script. Now, I've modularized this such that the only script that we truly need when we copy and paste is this progress bar right here. And you get to pass whatever you want to this script in terms of how the progress bar is going to render. Meaning you get to control the message, you get to control what layout it's going to go to, you get to control what values it's going to show, whether it's going to show a percentage, the record number you're on, or whatever you're going to be doing. Further, the script right here, run script, in this particular example, we look at run script, and we look at what it's doing. It is simply just doing a set field. So the great thing about this is it separates out the context of the script that operates on the record from the actual script that's running the progress bar. And what's really nice about that is you get to have a separation of logic. That separation of logic means that you now get to use that progress bar script in the whole of your solution on any layout where you're going to process any records. And that's what I really like about developing in FileMaker or developing in general. You can isolate things down to the smallest function of what they do, and that's what this particular script does. So let's look at the implementation. The implementation is really pretty straightforward, and the way that I've set up the progress bar script is it simply determines whether or not it needs to show a card window. If you've already drawn the card window or gone to the location where the records are, then the script is going to say, I don't need to draw a card window. There's already one in front of me. Which layout do I need to go to? So let's take a look at this. First off, we're using a global variable, as we already saw in the layout, that's going to contain the message. I am initializing that by setting it to 0 right here. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the Windows value variable to this custom function called card window location. Now I'm not going to dive into it on this video, but go to the magazine website and search for I believe it's Ultimate Card Windows is the name of the article. And it's going to discuss this custom function, which this custom function is available in this technique. I've added it, and it allows you to simply determine where you want a card window to be. Now, just as an example, I'll show you here. I'm going to put this on the top by simply just changing the value from center to top, and we'll go take a look at how easy it is to adjust that. We'll click our script now, and you will see that the card window is now up at the top. We go over and we modify our implementation again, and accidental double click there, which does a zoom there, and we'll put it on the bottom. And we'll say, okay, we'll save that script, come back, and we'll run it again. And there's our card window down on the bottom of the window. So you can see that this is pretty easy to control where things are going to go just by simply just changing a word. I want the card window to location to be in the center, and then I run this and I assign the dates. Now, there's another thing that you need to be aware of with regards to FileMaker. All the way back, going back to the early days of FileMaker, what used to happen is FileMaker would show and do everything that was within the script. So in other words, it would go to the related record, show that layout, refresh the layout, and then process the records. But the difference is, in newer versions of FileMaker, I don't know when it started, it may have been 17, 18, I know it was before 19, which is what I'm shooting this in, a version of FileMaker 19. FileMaker now attempts to run a script and asks itself, more or less, does this need to be shown to the user? If it doesn't, then it will run the script as quickly as possible and not even go show the user the aspect of going to a layout and then coming back to another layout. So FileMaker optimized all of its scripting routines. What this did is it caused a situation where some things can be so quick that they aren't even shown. Now in this file, we are processing close to 8,000 records, but we're only doing one thing to all of those 8,000 records. We're only running this script right here, which is using a single set field to simply set a random date value into a field. If it was a lot more complex, then the script itself that's processing the records would probably take a little bit more time. Now, the reason that I'm drawing your attention to that is the fact that we are able to control the amount of time that the progress bar stays on screen. Watch this. I'm going to go into this script, and first, before I go into the settings that you pass to the actual progress bar, let's talk about what this script is doing. It is setting up where we want the progress bar to show using the card window custom function. We are then going to the related records, and in this step, when I open it, we are actually specifying a new window. That new window, of course, is going to be a card window. We can see right there, we are indeed setting it to a card window, and we are setting it to progress. But in the script that is the progress bar renames the window to something that it absolutely knows what that name is, so that at the end of that script, it can simply just cancel out. Then I'm just going to use the values that came from that window function. So we'll move this. So the values that were populated in here, there's 4 of them, which include the top, left, width, and height. We can see are right here. Top, left, width, and height. It just goes in a reverse direction of what a clock would normally do. So it's reverse order there. Next, what we're going to do is we are going to pass in our values to the progress bar script. So you can see right here, we're calling the progress bar. So I'm going to look at this particular item. We're going to see what is getting passed to the script. So the script is getting a JSON object. That JSON object includes not just these, but additional items are possible to pass in there. In fact, with JSON, you can pass an unlimited number of parameters to a script. But here's what we're passing in: a message, the layout, the script that you want to that progress bar to run on the records, and a refresh. So here's where we get to this refresh. Watch what happens when I put the number 10,000. Now the refresh is a literal value in the progress bar script that says, I want you to actually pause every X number of records. That X number of records is this value right here. So every 10,000 records, I want you to refresh the progress bar. This comes into play based on what I just told you about FileMaker and about its optimized scripts. If FileMaker doesn't need to show something, it's going to attempt to not show it in favor of performance. So when I click Assign Dates, we are assigning based on 8,700 dates. I click it, and it's done. It did all of those. In fact, we'll go over to the list view. I will simply set all of these to be empty. Replace them to be nothing. We can see that the appointments on all of these are empty. We click on Assign Dates, and there they are. It's done. It did that without even showing the progress bar because we didn't even have 10,000 records. Now we go back over to the script, and we adjust this to, let's say, 500, and we now save this. So in other words, the progress bar script determines how fast and how much of the progress bar you show. That was 500. Now we'll go and we will set this down to, let's say, 100. Now this is obviously going to take a longer time because for every 100 records, you are updating or refreshing the progress bar. So you can see that this takes a lot longer, even though the actual amount of time to process the 8,000 records is less than a second or around a second. So you have to determine, it's a balance of how quickly do I want FileMaker to perform, usually it's as fast as possible, but how much feedback do I want to give the user? So that's where you have to determine each time that you're going to call the progress bar, do I want to show the user a lot of updating? Because of course, I can bump this all the way down to, let's say, 30, and it's going to go pretty slow relative to the fact that the script would have already been done by this time. So it really comes down to sort of knowing how many records you are processing, how quickly the actual script that's processing the records runs, and then how much you want to show the user in terms of user feedback. So for me, I'm probably in most situations saying, give me the total found count of the records that I'm dealing with, and then at least chop that in half or into quarters. And then that's the value that I'm going to use. And that means that the value that you're going to pass right here in terms of the refresh value is probably going to be a calculated value, meaning I want to have 1/4 of the total number of records. So I could say right here, get found count times 0.25, which is going to give me 1/4 of the records, and that's the value that I want to put into that. Oh, and by the way, you might want to use the floor function or the ceiling function on that in order to get a whole number value. Or round if you wanted to do that as well, or just put in a static value. Now the layout that you're passing in is the name of the layout that you want to target. That's what's going to establish your context. The script is the name of the script that you want to run. Now in previous videos you have seen where I do not like to use literal values, because what happens when I go rename that script named run script to run my script? Well, this breaks because this isn't named right here. And what I tend to do is I tend to use layout IDs and script IDs. And that's another topic that I cover extensively in many of my other videos, and I suggest that you go take a look and you can search for that on the FileMaker magazine of using those script IDs and layout IDs, because that means nothing's going to break if you, in the rest of FileMaker, go over and rename this script to run my script. And everywhere else where you've referenced it for a progress bar call, it doesn't break. You've used those, you've mapped the internal ID, which is canonical, to the current name of that script, and it always runs and it's always reliable. But here in this implementation, I just wanted to show things that were easy to implement without having yet additional complexity added on. But that is how you simply pass in the values to the script and say, here's what I want you to do. I want you to show this message. I want you to go to this layout. I want you to run this script on the records, and I want you to refresh on this interval. Now, there's some other values that you can pass in. The window positioning values, if you'd like to override those or preset them up and do all kinds of things. Here you can see there are also some merge values. Remember, I said you can call this scanning records or processing. Whatever the message is, you get to control the message, and we have just 3 different variables, and you, of course, as a developer, could put in additional variables if you want. We're using the same convention that FileMaker uses for merge symbols within the layout, but these are not actual merge symbols. They are just me saying this literal string of text with the curly braces, I want you to replace that to whatever the current record number is. And here I can say, I'm processing, I can get the record number, I can display the found count, and I can also display the percentage. And that's exactly what happens when we click the button and we see that as it processes. Let's go ahead and change this to 500 so it goes a little bit faster when we go click the button. And we can see right there that it is showing those values, and that's a pretty cool thing to have. So the only remaining part of this video that we're going to go through is for the subscribers of the magazine website. You, of course, as a subscriber, are able to access this video. If you're watching this as a free viewer, then I've given you all of the information about how this works. You just don't have access to the file, but here it is, and you're able to use this information. Now, for the subscribers, we're going to go through and take a look at the in-depth pieces of the progress bar script itself, and we will dissect that and understand exactly how it's working.
We hope you've enjoyed this video tutorial, and we'd like to say thank you for your subscription and your support. If you're not already a subscriber, head on over to www.filemakermagazine.com/subscribe for more information about the benefits of joining.